events in Alexander's career in Egypt. It's a brief career. He's going to leave soon. He's going to leave soon. But the other two events are that he's crowned as pharaoh. Probably in Memphis, that capital city from the days of practically from Narmer. And he wears the double crown. Interestingly, by the way, there is a temple. If you go to Luxor, Egypt, the ancient city that the Greeks called Thebes, the Wasit of the ancient Egyptians in the south, there's a temple built by Alexander the Great. And his name is in a cartouche, just like the other pharaohs. Interesting, by the way, it was a little bit of a problem. How do you spell Alexander in hieroglyphs? There's no X in the hieroglyphic alphabet, so we did it with a K and an S. Sounds right? Alexander, right? Alexandros. So there is a temple that Alexander built. But where?
Hello, people, and how are you doing today? Back with another video on ancient Egypt. Alexander the Great. I still haven't answered my question. What made him so great? Okay. So, professors breaking down 3 of the major events in the career of the life and times of Alexander the Great. Interesting. That sounds like a good title. The Life and Times of Alexander the Great. Okay, well, let's get into it.
Thebes. Sacred Thebes. The one that always held out until those Persians. Right? So he has a temple. But he's declared king and he is crowned as the ruler of Egypt. And this is going to start, by the way, 300 years of Greeks ruling Egypt. But remember, there is this reverence that Alexander had for Egypt. He's not this conqueror who's going to plunder. He's not going to do that. He's going to be Egyptian as much as he can. So we know that he is crowned, probably at Memphis, king of Egypt. The other important event is that he founds the city of Alexandria. By the way, throughout his career, he founded about 12 cities of Alexandria. This is the one that took. Right? This is the one that worked. And there's quite a tradition about how he founded it. We do have historians from the time of Alexander, right? There are historians of Alexander. So we're getting closer to modern times. We have some records. And we know the name of the architect, Dinocrates. Right? He had his Greek architect. And they laid out the city together, walking the land. Now, let me say something about Alexandria in ancient times. There had been quite a bit of excavation in Alexandria, Egypt. There have not been ancient cities found from pharaonic times. There was not a large population in Alexandria. So view it pretty much as open land. Part of the reason, I think, is, as I mentioned many times, the Egyptians were not good sailors. They weren't having a port ready to go out to the Mediterranean, They didn't need it as a port. They weren't going. They weren't sailing on the Waj War, the Great Green. So it's an open area. You can pretty much pick your spot and build your city.
So Alexander was thinking of commercializing. He saw all this land and was thinking money. How can we increase our wealth? But at the same time, he's thinking, if I force my way in, they might rebel. And they know the land better than I do. But if I give them something in return, if I look out for them, they'll look out for me. Why can't politicians come to that conclusion and act on it? They want to lie to you and make you promises and don't deliver on shit. At least with Alexander, he went in there, kicked out the foreigners, and they crowned him king. And he took care of them. Yeah, he built the city. He brought new revenue into Egypt. But still, he understood how business works, how politics works. These boneheads for the past 50, 60 years, they don't care. They want the money, but they ain't willing to give up nothing. Ridiculous.
And he walks the land with Dinocrates. And according to the tradition, they lay out the city. They didn't have chalk. They wanted to use chalk. They didn't have chalk to lay out the streets. They used grain. So they used grain, dropping it along. And they laid out the city's streets. They laid out the city's streets in a grid at right angles. One of the early planned cities in the history of the world, right? To take advantage of the Mediterranean breezes, right? So it's right at the angle, so you get the breezes coming down the streets. And he founds the city of Alexandria and leaves. And leaves. Alexander is going to conquer the world, right? But just remember, Alexander is so different in many ways from Egyptians. He is founding a city, on a port, very Greek. So he's going to be able to do trading. He's viewing this with the future. This is not typical Egyptian isolationism, you know. We're hemmed in by two deserts on one side, a river on another side, cataracts on the other side. Nobody's getting into us. No. Alexander's looking out. He wants trade. This is going to be a great city. And he was right. He was right. He picked the right spot. So he founds Alexandria and he leaves. Now, he leaves with his army. A large professional army. Large. 50,000. 50,000 men. The logistics of an army of 50,000 men is daunting. For example, if you have 50,000 men, how do you draw water from them for wells? You could have as many as maybe a dozen wells, and they'll die of thirst. You can't get enough water from wells for an army this big. How do you feed them? How do you feed 50,000 people? I mean, imagine a large football stadium, you know, a reasonable sized football stadium, feeding all those people, maybe for months. Can you go into a small village? Certainly not. So to a great extent, Alexander's movements, the movements of his Macedonian